This film was made over the course of actually a few years. We started in late 2012, maybe early 2013, and it took 2 years to shoot all the stuff. It took about a year to edit, got it to Troma, and then they released it in 2016. Only cost about $500 to make. Unlike narrative filmmaking, where I think it is very necessary to shoot several consecutive days in a row, not only to ramp up speed, but to have consistency in things like people's wardrobe, tone of acting, having the same camera operators and all that stuff. Documentary, you can be a weekend warrior, meaning you could build a documentary over a couple of years just by shooting some stuff on the weekends. The way this documentary came about was that Ken Powell and I decided that we wanted to make a documentary. Initially, it was going to be about some of my older films. But what had happened was when Mark of the Beast, which was this horror film I was putting out, when I was starting to try to get it into the video stores that were still around into 2012 and 2013, you started to see this real drop-off. Obviously, the video store had been declining for many, many years. Basically, when Kim's Video went out of business, and then we saw this last Blockbuster in Queens go out of business, we kind of saw the writing on the wall. And so we decided to make this more about that, and then go on VHS hunts and try to discover interesting VHS movies throughout New York. And a lot of that was inspired by the Found Footage Film Festival guys, Nick Brewer and Joe Pickett. My oldest brother had worked at a video store, and then my other older brother had owned the Fun Stuff Video Store franchise. I had known a lot about the industry, and I was able to tap him, find out, learn more about it, and then also sort of go on several adventures. I would recommend doing a special interest documentary. It's never a silver bullet. It's never going to be guaranteed that they'll be successful. But special interest documentary and low-budget horror are two types of feature films that are still at least in demand. So you can think of it in terms of that. Like, because you do have to put on your hat in regard to creating a product. Do people want to see this stuff? In those two cases, they do. So there are several shots that are showing Kim's Video, which was one of the staples in East Village in New York City. The Golf Goofs thing that you saw, that was from a store in Astoria. And when we went in, you could tell it was sort of on its last leg. So this is the last Blockbuster in Queens. So the most important thing when shooting a documentary is when you're interviewing people. So make sure the people you're interviewing sign permission to have them on camera. You definitely want to try to get permission to any interior that you shoot. If you're shooting in a whatever it is, a pawn shop or a video store, you want to try to get some kind of locations waiver. If you really want to explore fair use, there is this thing called the Fair Use Handbook. Fair use allows you to use short clips of things, movies and such, that you maybe didn't have formal permission to use in your documentary. The best scenario is that you get permission to use any video clip or of another movie or anything like that. I am not a lawyer, so you really have to do your own research on how to use fair use. We got permission to use most of the clips in our film. A lot of them were Troma clips and stuff like that. We used a lot of movie trailers, and movie trailers typically are meant to be spread around and shared. And so if you're using a movie trailer to a film, you tend to be in safer territory because it is a sort of promotional material. There are certain movie properties owned by certain conglomerates that are just so big, it's probably best to stay away from. Like, I'm not going to put the Star Wars trailer in my movie. I'm not going to use clips from Star Wars in my movie and then try to make a product and then sell it. I'm not going to use clips of Harry Potter in my movie and then try to sell it and make a product out of it. So just keep in mind that a lot of these conglomerates are litigious. There are certain things that are more likely to get snagged. What I had, I was able to have a lawyer look over the clips, and the movie was able to get errors in admissions insurance. And what that means was that I was on very safe ground with my fair use because a lawyer had looked at it and it was able to be insured. This is a big disclaimer. You have to do your own research. One of the best things I ever did was hire Debbie Rochon as a producer. I was able to interview her in the documentary, and then she was able to try to facilitate getting some of the cooler interviews that we got in both VHS Massacre and VHS Massacre 2. One of the things that you might want to do if you're going to do a documentary with no budget is to pick something local. You have to be able to commute to it very easily. You have to be able to go and shoot footage randomly on weekends. So whatever the subject matter is, think of it in that term. I live in New York City, so a lot of the stuff I was able to just travel throughout the boroughs and get interviews and go to video stores and things like that. So wherever you are, think of it in terms of that. I know, but that being said, I know people that have been able to go to, let's say, horror conventions and get several interviews with people and build a project that way. So that's a possibility too. But a lot of the people in the documentary, like Carmen Capobianco here and Debbie Rochon, I've known over being in the industry for so long, and that will happen eventually. You will slowly, if you're making films over several years, you'll kind of build a group of people that you got along best with, and then you could reach out to them maybe and work with them in various ways. You can conduct films over Zoom. It's not the best scenario. I did a documentary called MacLeod about the film composer Kevin MacLeod. And actually what I was able to do with him, this is a cool trick, is if you can't travel to see someone and you want to do an interview with them, try to convince them to... you do the Zoom interview and try to convince them to take their own phone and put it on a tripod or prop it up, and also roll on their interview with their own camera, with their own phone camera. And then after, they send you the footage. There is a debate about whether you should pay someone to do an interview in a documentary. And some people think you shouldn't. I would add to this, if that person is doing producing, or they're traveling and you're just trying to throw them a little money for like food and travel and stuff like that, then I think paying them is totally fine. The reason why I would recommend trying to get some kind of independent distribution, whether it's something like Troma or Full Moon or Glass Eye Pix, there's Wild Eye, there's SRS, there's a number of other companies that distribute low-budget stuff. I like Troma because it was part of the legacy. They'd been going for 50 years. It's one of the longest-running independent film distribution companies in the United States. I grew up reading about the Roger Corman film movement, starting in the 70s and going up all the way to this day. But that was more of a West Coast thing. So when I moved to New York, I thought to myself, well, what's the equivalent of that? The equivalent of that is Troma. So if you put a movie out to them, you're not really going to get paid because they're not killing it as it is. I would imagine the low budget stuff they put out, the no budget stuff they put out, at best breaks even. I think most of it loses money. But it's really important that they exist, that they can give a chance to filmmakers.